Of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. Donald Trump says he's the most honest human being, perhaps, that God has ever created. That's great. Oh, you want to talk about projection on a massive, massive scale? Yes, the most honest person. I got to tell you, I sat and I thought about that for a little bit. And I'm going, to him, he probably thinks he's being honest. Most con men, the best con men actually believe their own BS. So in this vein, I've always said he is one of the best cons because he believes his own press. So there it is. Yes, told the crowd, I am the most honest human being, perhaps, that God ever created. And the weird thing is the faithful bought it. And this is the weird thing, and this is where I want to start today. Because I get email from folks every day that, and it's, I get a lot of people say, hey, you do a great job, love the work, love this. I get, and I love that. Hey, this made me think a little bit. I love this story. I love, this guest. Terrific. Thank you. Appreciate that. A lot of it uplifting, a lot of it positive. But then, well, there are my detractors, the insult brigade, as I call them, because they can't just leave their criticism. They got to make it personal. It isn't about the issues. It isn't about something I've said. They've got to take it to the next level, and we have those conversations. And then they from 3,000 miles away they go, let's meet and fight. And you go, okay. Oh, where are we going to do that? Can you meet at 3:00 today? Clearly not, keyboard warrior. And I got one of those this morning. A gentleman, reached out to me and he wanted to enlighten me. He's going to enlighten me about the union jobs that were lost over the last 65 years. It's his belief. And again, the Believe crowd, they have their talking points. Never mind what the facts and reality are. They have their beliefs, and he was hell bent on telling me that Democrats lost more manufacturing jobs than Republicans did. And you can go back and you can look at the years when that happened, and the huge recessions that we had because of Republican policies. And just on its face, the reality of the Reagan recession, the reality of the H.W. Bush recession, the reality of the George W. Bush recession, my goodness. And of course, the Trump, every time there's a Republican president, Democrats have to come in and clean up the mess. And they do. Do I agree with every Democratic president? No, I don't agree with hardly any of them. And this is where this black and white thinking that the right seems to project on everyone else falls apart. And this is where the conversations come. Because look, here's a working class guy, told me he's a union member for 35 years, evidently conservative, Clinton hater. He wants to blame Hillary and Bill. And look, does Bill have some blame? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. But it wasn't just Bill Clinton. And there are people who want to go, Bill Clinton signed NAFTA. Yes, he did. But he didn't dream it up. NAFTA was birthed under Ronald Reagan. It was Reagan's idea. Not really his idea. Let's not give him too much credit. It came out of his mouth because he heard it somewhere. It was fully negotiated under H.W. Bush, and the first rounds of it were signed by H.W. Bush. And it was signed into law by Bill Clinton. Now, in 92, when the campaign was going on, NAFTA was a hot button issue. And there was only one person in the race that was against it. It was that crazy big-eared guy from Texas. And he was right. There would be a giant second sound. And there was. We lost millions of jobs because of NAFTA and our insane trade policies. But to say it was Bill Clinton's fault solely is hugely disingenuous. Because the reason I voted for Clinton, a couple of reasons. One being he was going to sign strike replacement, didn't, but he was less bad than H.W. Bush. And that's the reality for so many elections. We get the choice of bad or worse. Bad or worse. Clinton was bad. H.W. was much worse. That was the choice working people had. That was the choice unions had. They had to get behind and hope they could move Bill Clinton in a direction that was going to make it less bad. And they did, because Clinton did put into law some toothless labor and environmental regulations that would not have been there otherwise. And this is where having these political discussions in a black and white framework, or I bought my hat and I got my team and my team's always right and your team's always wrong, breaks down with someone like me who sees wrong all around. Because understand, the whole neoliberal agenda isn't owned by one party. Most of those thoughts germinated back in the 50s with the conservative movement, with William F. Buckley, with Milton Friedman trying to pimp vouchers to get around desegregation. A lot of this stuff came out of conservative circles to, well, break up labor unions, to go after working people. And the weird thing is they sold it to workers as a way to make their lives better, because you can be like the folks in the corner office. And we were sold that. And look, he even says this in the email. He even understands this. He got that point right. He was right when they sold us the idea that global economic policy was going to save us all. He was right. This guy is right. We were lied to. And even back then, I was arguing, no, that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is what did happen. The elite, the folks who are selling this to us, they're going to pocket all the money. And we're going to be left with zip. And it's what's happened over the last 45 years. The Rand Corporation came out with a study not too long ago that says, look, the working class of this country has seen massive amounts of wealth extracted from their lives. And what happened to it? It created the largest billionaire class in history. We've seen this. We've also seen, productivity gains have gone, marched up at a 45-degree angle on the graph. Whereas from 1945 to the middle 70s, earnings went right with it. Workers' wages kept right with it. Why? Because you had a strong labor movement that demanded it. So in order to decouple that strong relationship between that meritocracy between productivity gains and wage increases, you had to break up the unions, which conservatives have done and corporate Democrats have done. But you can't explain that to someone who is a black and white thinker, someone who bought the team hat, someone who's got the Q shirt. I got my colors, I'm red, which is why they're siding with Putin over in Russia. And the reality is all this stuff was predictable. And the wealth class knew. They couldn't come out and tell us what really was going on. There's a great piece in the New York Times this weekend on stealth politics, where the guy's talking about, the wealthy can't tell us what really they're planning on doing because none of us would go for it. They couldn't tell us that they were going to send manufacturing jobs overseas for cheap production to make profits bigger for corporate America so they could dole it out to shareholders and the owners. That wouldn't have sold. No, they sold us. No, it's going to be great. We're going to get cheap products and we're going to all get better jobs sitting in corner offices wearing white shirts and ties. It's going to be utopia. We won't have to do that dirty hard work anymore. Your children are going to have it better than you did. And what did we find out? No, our children got screwed. Our children got sold down the road for a profit motive. Our communities are broken. And look, do I understand the anger these people feel, especially the guy today? Yeah, because I've traveled this country. I've seen broken communities. I've been in communities where that factory was the identity of that community, where, we used to make this. This was our pride and joy. This is what we were known for. This is who we were. And they snatched it away from us. They took it overseas so that some rich guy somewhere, who knows where, could make more. So they could put more money in their pocket, more money in the investor's pocket. And what are we left with? We're left with a building that's crumbling. We're left with destroyed families. We're left with drug and alcohol problems. We're left with poverty and despair. And you wonder why people are angry. And you wonder why people are angry at both political parties, because nobody's addressing it. Now, I will give Democrats a hand here. They are trying. There are policies that they are attempting to move that they're trying and have been trying. But again, the culture war stuff that keeps being thrown up at us. Hey, stupids, over here. Look at what they're doing over there. Pay attention to that. Never mind the fact that your kids are saddled with a lifetime of student loan debt. Never mind that your children are not going to have the same opportunities that you had. Never mind that American dream you grew up believing possible. Now that's all gone now. Worry about whoever's marrying who. Worry about who's going to what bathroom. Worry about whatever outrage we can feed you, whatever construct we can create to keep you in a tizzy. And we're going to pay these outrage merchants to keep shoving this down your throat and keep giving you someone to blame so that you can contact me and say, you're wrong, Rick, you're full of lies, and you know it was Hillary who did all this stuff. And all I can say is, okay, if you say so. Which is generally, well, it's because you don't have a better answer. No, I'm not going to argue with somebody who absolutely knows without having any proof. Because it comes back to, I believe. And this is what happens when we're in this polarized world. No one's willing to give an inch. I'm willing to say, look, this was our politics. The billionaire class of this country bought everybody. The one honest thing that Donald Trump did say that I believe during his 2016 campaign, the one honest thing, he bought everybody. He paid all the politicians to get what he wanted. Because that's what the billionaire class does. I find it interesting. Mike Gibbons last week, and we talked about this, not just on our daily show last week, but also on our Saturday show in New York City. Mike Gibbons, rich guy, said that, rich people pay all the taxes and middle class people pay nothing. And I started thinking about it over the weekend. Do you remember that whole movement around 2010? The T-Twizzlers who were running around going, we're taxed enough already. Which, for those who don't remember, T stands for taxed enough already, TEA. For my Tea Party friends who are in the, flying the flag, didn't actually know what it means. According to Mike Gibbons, you're all wrong because you didn't pay anything. You're not paying enough. So all of that marching on, don't tread under me, I'm taxed enough already. He's telling you you're all wrong. And that's what they believed all along. They were using you as useful idiots that you've always been because they can divide us and pit us against each other and then sit back and laugh at us. And of course, rob us blind. Now, Gibbons let this out. It's not something the wealth class says out loud normally because they like us pitted against each other. They like us infighting. They like us saying, you don't agree with me, I'll meet you out back, we'll fight about it. Because you know who we're not going after? That's right, them. And this way, when we're rolling around on the ground and money's falling out of our pocket, what little we have left, they'll pay somebody to go pick it up and steal that from us too. Because that's what they do. And this is where I reach out to those folks and why I encourage people who disagree with me to reach out. Have these conversations because nothing is black and white. Nothing is absolute. Nobody is as pure as the driven snow. Everyone's got baggage. And look, if there were a Republican out there right now that I truly believe cared about the working class, I'd be supporting them. But here's the reality. Right now, the stated goal of the Republican Party is to attack working people. to pursue policies that are going to enrich the corporate class and the moneyed interests. And nothing says that more than that tax bill back in 2017, where they made tax cuts for corporate America and the very wealthy permanent, but the pittance that you got, that little bit of, hey, look what we did for you, sunsets in 10 years, and that actually you end up paying back. That should have been the glaring red light that, oh, here, this is the, look what we did for you, and then in a couple of years, we're gonna snatch it back and make you pay the rest of it, with interest, of course, while doing nothing about education, while doing nothing about healthcare, while doing nothing about infrastructure, by doing nothing about making lives better, all while saying, hey, we're going to create jobs. Hey, we're going to bring back manufacturing. Hey, we've identified a problem that everyone agrees on, and did nothing. That's the point. They're going to rile you up, going to get you all tingly in the panties, all bunched up, all riled up, all juiced up, ready to go, going to point you in a direction and tell you to go, just like they did on January 6th. And then they're going to go in their tents and they're going to watch it on TV and they're going to laugh at you, just like they did on January 6th. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you got any thoughts, questions, comments, want to hear it, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Let's quick go to the phone lines. Got Alice on line 1. Alice, how are we today?
We are good. How are you?
Fabulous. What's on your mind?
Well, all I want to say is I don't know why we wouldn't want Hillary. My God, she's done everything according to the right wing.
Gotten away with it.
Yeah, I mean, the woman is brilliant. And, I mean, look at her age, and you know, and they have her sneaking in there and strangling Epstein and hanging him up there all by herself. What a woman.
There you go. What a woman.
I mean, I'm telling you, I just think I can just picture her all in black, going all ninja, climbing the fence, swinging on bars and across everything, and, you know, sneaking down into that jail, and there you go. I mean, what a woman.
There you go. Nasty woman, right?
Yeah, you know.
Good stuff, Alice. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Let's go to line 3. Got Jim over there. Jim, what's on your mind, buddy?
I got a comment about Trump. You know, I kind of find it funny. He's the most honest man. He's the most honest man that God has ever created. You know, I have a theory. I call it the 75% theory. And what I refer to it as is that on any given day, 75% of the American people are morons. And the other 25% of us kind of drift in and out from time to time. But it just, you know, I think they're just mainly basically a bunch of scared people that have a lot of fear in their heart, and a guy like Trump just says the stuff they want to hear, Mr. Tough Guy. But, I don't know how we're going to get it out of them. I almost think sometimes he might have to do what they do when people get kidnapped by cults, take them somewhere and deprogram them. But I appreciate your thoughts.
Thanks so much, Jim. Appreciate it. No, I've said the opposite. I think they've all been captured by a cult. You think of the F channel over there at Fox. You think of right-wing talk radio and 30 years of right-wing blather and the dominance that has been there. A generation that's been brainwashed by that kind of, the free market is, invisible hand will control everything. And, those evil socialist Democrats, they're the problem. And yet what made this country great was the New Deal, really. What really made the economy for working people possible were New Deal policies. What made working lives for the first time in civilized history something palatable were social programs that came out of the New Deal. The most prosperous working class in history was right here in this country after World War II. That era right after World War II, right up until the middle 70s, was the time when the working class globally shared the most wealth, shared in the wealth that their labor created. And the wealthy hated that because the same people who were against those New Deal policies that Roosevelt shoved down their throat, and working people were in the streets demanding that the people that they're behind trying to stop today. And like I said, there's a great piece over at the New York Times talking about the stealth politics and the billionaires, the Koch brothers and their ilk, who spend billions of dollars on think tanks and enormous amounts of money to influence how we view the world and who we blame. And this is where the left has fallen down over the years. We think our intellectual arguments are always going to win when the right just goes, blame them. And it's so much easier to go blame them, especially if it's someone you don't really like. Look, I'm not a huge fan of Hillary Clinton's. Policy-wise, I think she's got good chops. I thought she was the best candidate in 2016. Not a huge fan, but she was the better candidate. But people, want to have a beer with so-and-so. Yeah, I would love to have a beer with George W. Bush. Seemed like a good guy to have a beer with. Don't want to be president. And this is where our politics have to come back to. I want smart people with good policies that are going to solve problems, not create them. And understand what corporate America wants is they want to solve problems for them, but create them for us. And people say, well, NAFTA didn't work the way it was supposed to. No, NAFTA worked exactly as it was supposed to. Oh, the end of Glass-Steagall didn't work the way it was supposed to. Nope. Worked exactly the way it was supposed to. These policies make rich people richer, and the rest of us, especially the working class, make us much poorer. That, my friends, that's the goal. And until we wake up to that very basic fact, that simple rule of American economics, we're going to continue to allow ourselves to be easily sliced and diced and pitted against each other. White, black, male, female, gay, straight, whatever. Blonde hair, dark hair, 2 thumbs, 1 thumb. It's not going to matter. They're going to figure out a way for us to keep attacking each other. The old Jay Gould quote, I can pay half the working class to murder the other half. That is their living mantra. And until we get past that, and as working people, say that our interests of leading the best life we can, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, economic opportunities for all of us, until we can agree on those things, we're screwed. And maybe it's the next depression that brings us back to this. I don't know. But we better figure it out, and we better figure it out quick. I got lots to get to. Lots to get to. If you're just tuning in, make sure you grab the podcast so you never miss a second of the program. You can do that at thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you never miss it. And share with your friends as well. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day New York City transit workers in TWU Local 100 ended their 11-day walkout. The strike occurred in the context of hard times for New York City workers. The city had teetered on the edge of municipal bankruptcy just a few years earlier. Unrelenting inflation and austerity measures against municipal workers had taken its toll. Years of recession meant freezes in hiring and promotions. It also meant increasingly dangerous working conditions. The MTA cut back funding for basic maintenance, investment, and service. Derailments, accidents, and fires were common, and crime soared at stations and bus stops. Transit workers found themselves operating malfunctioning equipment and confronted by frustrated and angry riders. With wages frozen, cost of living adjustments or COLA capped, and the establishment of a 3-tiered pension plan, workers had had enough. They walked out on the first day of the month, demanding a 30% wage increase, quarterly COLA, and increased vacation time. New York City Mayor Ed Koch opposed the workers' demands, fearing any victory for the union would ruin upcoming contract negotiations with the city's 300,000 municipal workers. He also used the strike as an occasion to whip up anti-union sentiment. While the contract was voted up by a 3-1 margin, labor historian Joshua Freeman notes that the 1980 strike ended up in victory that many transit workers saw as a defeat. Workers won a 17% wage increase over 2 years, a 3% cost of living adjustment, and increased contributions to the Health and Welfare Fund. But they also had to concede to reduced breaks, 2-tiered wages, and increased job duties across classifications. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
I think we can now say the obvious. The Republican Party has gone bull-goose bonkers. Its leaders have turned the once proud GOP brand into an unprincipled gaggle of corporate profiteers, hate-mongers, and screwball conspiracy theorists. They're so far out that the Hubble telescope couldn't find them. But where is my Democratic Party? Here's a transformative opportunity to forge a solid political coalition, a multiracial, urban-rural, farm-labor alliance based on fundamental principles and programs of fairness and opportunity for all. Isn't that what the party says it stands for? This is the prime time to demonstrate it, to reach out and unite ordinary Americans behind a national agenda of lasting progressive change. It's not like the party elders would have to start from scratch, for an energized, feisty movement of grassroots battlers against corporate greed and government injustice is already organizing, winning, and growing popular support all across the country. But rather than welcoming and building on the exciting advances of these popular movements, the party's old-line insider clique of big funders, consultants, and corporate politicos passively assume that the GOP's goofiness and nastiness will turn off enough voters that Democrats can win by default. Meanwhile, the establishment insists that Democrats only push modest incremental reforms so as not to offend corporate funders or spook moderate Republicans. Hello? Brilliant strategists. A primary function of the Democratic Party is to offend the corporate powers. Also, there are only about 6 moderate Republicans left in America, so appeasing them is not a big win, especially when it costs you the support of grassroots voters eager for a politics bold enough and big enough to end business-as-usual economics. This is Jim Hightower saying, as our own history teaches, it takes intentional gutsiness to create a politics that matters. Republicans won't do that. Will Democrats?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I haven't thought about this in a long time. COVID has kind of taken a lot of stuff off the table, but the White House Correspondents' Dinner is coming up. I wonder if they'll have a comedian. I know that they had sworn them off after that evil woman, what was her name, Michelle Wolf, did what I thought was an amazing job. Because, hey, Trump, if you didn't show up, you're going to get skewered. But April 30th, I guess, is the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and they're going to mandate that everyone be vaccinated. So my first thought was, I'm sure Fox News will be there. I'm sure the F channel will be there because they're all vaccinated. Even though they're, I guess, running around telling people not to. I'll bet they'll be there. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on this, that, the other, the top stories of the day. I've asked Chris Hahn to come talk with us. Chris is a syndicated radio host and host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. You can find that wherever you find your podcasts. Chris, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, anytime, man. How you doing?
I'm good. What do you think of the Correspondents' Dinner? Everyone has to be vaccinated. too onerous, too much for the Biden administration?
Oh, I mean, look, get vaccinated, and go to the damn dinner and stop being whiny little, what. I know we're over the, I know I'm not allowed to use that word here, but look, I'm tired of people taking minor inconveniences and calling it an affront to their rights. It's ridiculous. It's free. You can get it at any drugstore. And just go do it, and it might save your life, or at least save you from getting a severe illness.
I don't even think it's an inconvenience. It's going to save your skin.
You know what? When you're going to pick up a pack of gum, go get boosted. It's not that big of a deal. And I'm tired of these people whining about it. It's just annoying. Yeah. So, and again, I'm not begging people to do it, but I do think that there should be things that you can't do if you're not vaccinated. And if you don't want to get vaccinated, don't go to the correspondence dinner. It's fine. You don't have to get vaccinated. It's a free country. Go live in the woods.
There you go. See how simple that is?
And by the way, they better have a comedian there. and it is okay if the comedian offends you. That's what comedians are supposed to do. They're supposed to make you think. And Michelle Wolf was fantastic. And every president, since they started doing this, has been skewered by the comedian. The problem with the former guy, Donald Trump, is he can't take a joke. And I don't know how anybody could be a supporter of a guy who takes himself so serious that he can't take a joke from a world-class comedian.
Yeah, now the big question I have is, will Joe Biden slap the comedian?
No, he will not. Joe Biden will not slap the comedian. He will take a I was listening to Dana Carvey's podcast today, and he does a crazy good Joe Biden. And I'm laughing, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm laughing so hard. He's making fun of Joe Biden, and I'm laughing. And I have so many friends that are like Trumpies that get offended, and they won't watch comedians because they made fun of Trump. Have you ever watched comedy when the president gets skewered? It's the way it is.
Yep, every president, and I've laughed at all of them.
Yes,
because we have to be able to do that. It's not like we're taking you to a Saudi embassy in
the
Turkey
guy on
or anything.
Saturday Night Live does Trump and Biden.
Yeah.
Same guy.
Yeah, same guy.
And they're hilarious impressions of both of them.
And he does a great job. Now, I want to switch channel. Over the weekend, the story came out that Kushner got $2 billion from the Saudis for his hedge fund. This is kind of a big deal because, a lot of the noise around was maybe this was a payoff for the Khashoggi thing.
Oh,
when you execute somebody and you saw him up into little pieces and carry him out in bags, that's kind of a big deal. I think $2 billion is a lot for that. I got to think there's much more than just sawing up a New York Times reporter.
I think that's part of it, though.
Yeah, I think it's part of it, but I think it's got to be much more than just that.
Yeah, look, I mean, Jared Kushner was in charge of Middle East peace negotiations. He was in charge of Middle East policy, and he was clearly bought and paid for by the Saudis. And, we want to talk about what's in Hunter Biden's freaking laptop. Let's talk about what Jared Kushner was doing while he had an office in the West Wing that earned him $2 billion from the Saudis. That's real money that we can trace, that we know is there. What did he do for them to deserve that? Because let's face it, the guy is not some financial genius. He inherited a lot of his money. And yeah, he's made a little bit more of it. I will give him some credit for that. But come on, $2 billion. Yeah. Now I get it. To the Saudi, Crown Prince, $2 billion probably isn't like, it's probably like you and I buying a sandwich for somebody. But it's a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is where you brought up Hunter Biden, and I, Hunter Biden doesn't have any role in government. I mean,
none.
Unless you can show me a quid pro quo where he went to Joe and Joe did something, I don't care what he did because he had no influence. This is a whole different deal.
Yes.
I want to know what's on Jared Kushner's laptop. I want to know what Dumb Jr. was doing in the name of We the People. And this is the weird thing because my conservative friends, my Trumpy friends, my Q-nut friends, they don't seem all that concerned, which is weird.
Care. No, we knew he was stealing from us. We didn't know Joe Biden was stealing from us. We want to know what he stole. That's the thing, right? It's like we've got this fake conspiracy about Joe Biden. They keep talking about, well, he had to deal with Burisma. He had to deal with this. I'm like, okay, show me the crime. In America, unfortunately, people trade off of their parents' political power.
Yes, remember Billy Beer?
Forever.
Yes.
Right. I made a joke on my radio show the other day. I'm sure Tad Lincoln was out there, like, trying to get some money off of his dad, Abe Lincoln. It's been going on.
No, everybody remembers Billy Beer. You remember Billy Beer?
Of course.
Everybody remembers Roger Clinton. Everybody remembers there was somebody trying to just sell their name, but they didn't have access to get policy moved.
Michael Reagan is still living off Ronald Reagan's name.
Yes.
Still.
Yeah. So, but here's the weird thing. The weird thing is the advisors of this, the Crown Prince's money said, no, this isn't a great idea. And the Crown Prince said, no, it is a good idea. So to me, this smells bad.
Oh, completely smells bad. And, there should be some investigation, right? If we're going to because let's face it, if the Republicans take the House, there'll be 15 committees looking into the Hunter Biden laptop incident. But nobody will want to talk about the $2 billion handed to a man who's basically, his portfolio in the White House was basically being president, right? Like Jared Kushner was the guy who actually was running the government when Donald Trump was president of the United States. Donald Trump was just making speeches and, blowing things up.
Yeah, exactly. Now, since you brought up, investigations, there's a long-going investigation. Maybe you've heard of it. In my view, hasn't been going fast enough. Haven't heard enough about it. But there's this January 6th committee thing that maybe you've heard of.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Over the weekend,
I haven't heard much lately, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, over the weekend, there's been some news that maybe there's enough. Well, actually, they came out and said that there is enough. They've concluded there's enough evidence to make a criminal referral against Trump to the Justice Department. But, the reporting coming out, everyone's a little split on whether they should or they shouldn't. Liz Cheney says there's no split. So why the reticence?
I don't know. If there's evidence that the man committed a crime, charge him with the crime and let the Justice Department and let the justice system in this country deal with it. The man, in my opinion, committed the man led a coup attempt of this country. We've seen enough. At least enough for a jury to decide. I mean, I don't want to be the judge and jury. I don't know that I've seen all of the evidence. And if this man has a case to defend himself, that's his right in America. But no man or woman in this country should be held above the law. We are a country of law, not a country of men. And to think that because Donald Trump served as president, he's going to be treated differently than you or I would be treated, that is not what we're about in this country.
No, I'm with you, but the sad reality is the wealthy and the elite, they are treated much differently.
And look, I want to say this, Rick. I don't think Donald Trump will ever serve a day in prison. And I think if he's convicted of a crime where he would go to prison, I think it is incumbent on whatever president of the United States is president at the time to pardon him, because I don't think we want presidents going to jail. But that said, I think the nation deserves to know what this man was up to so that he doesn't get elected again. And that's the more serious threat to me.
No, and I said from the beginning of all of this that there's no way that we're gonna hold this guy accountable, because we haven't. And you're right. We don't do this, but but at some point we should, for the big stuff. I don't want there to be every administration looking at the last one going, okay, and nitpicking. But I don't know what happened on January 6th was kind of a BFD. I mean, it was kind of a big deal. When you're talking about trying to overturn an election, trying to stop the certification, and now we're finding out, you had the Proud Boy coming out last week admitting, we were there to stop the certification, even though everybody knew that's why they were there.
He's telling us what we already knew. And it was the biggest BFD, in my opinion. And it needs to be, and not just the foot soldiers, but everybody involved needs to be held accountable, up to and including Donald Trump. But again, I don't think he'll ever go to jail.
Now, there's also been a federal judge, I guess, this week that says that I guess she's likely to allow this group of Georgia voters to move forward on their constitutional challenge against Marjorie Three Names. Because they're saying, look, how can you run for re-election when, this January 6th thing is out there? Thoughts on this?
Look. This woman is a danger to democracy. Now, I know we sometimes take her less than seriously, but there are a lot of people in this country who take her very seriously. And she's out there, basically, anybody who disagrees with her is a pedophile, right? And we laugh it off, But somewhere there's somebody reading this saying, "Oh, Mitt Romney's a pedophile. I better go do something about it." Right? And like we saw with Pizzagate, she's a danger. When you're dehumanizing your opponent, it's a danger. Now, whether or not she was given tours to insurrectionists on January 6th, I don't know that you could disqualify somebody from running for Congress without them being convicted or it truly being proven, or maybe the standard's lower. I want to hear what the court has to say. But if she had anything to do with anything on that day and was giving tours and giving aid and comfort to insurrectionists, then she too is an insurrectionist and she should be held accountable. I believe that people like Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz should be equally held accountable. Yeah, they're not as vitriolic in their rhetoric towards their opponents, but they were just as culpable on January 6th.
No, and look, I think all of the people that they've tried to get in front of the committee should be forced in front of the committee. I look at my congressman, Scott Perry. I want to know what his actions were on that day. I want to know what Jim Jordan's actions were.
What did they know and when did they know it?
Absolutely.
I want to know too.
And look, if you're a serving representative of we the people, we have a right to know. We have a duty to know what you were doing in our name, on our payroll, in those moments. And we should be demanding that, not just going, oh, hey, we choose not to participate. Nonsense. We should be dragging them in there and sitting them in the seat.
I agree. Cuff them. Bring them in.
Absolutely.
You don't want to go quietly. You don't want to do it. You don't want to do the right thing by the country. By the way, you have a right in this country to take the fifth if you think you're going to be incriminated. You're going to incriminate yourself. That's your right under our Constitution. But you know what? You don't have a right to not show up.
Exactly my point. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show with Chris Hahn. Chris is a syndicated radio host and host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast. You can find that wherever you grab your podcast. Also, check out his website, chrishahn.com. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. I want to get some of your thoughts on the big news today is Finland and Sweden are looking to join NATO after seeing what Russia is doing in Ukraine, and Russia not happy about it, actually threatening Sweden and Finland, saying, hey, you could be next. We are really on the brink of World War III, aren't we?
I go back and forth on this and what we should do, and we should let them into NATO tomorrow. Like, there shouldn't be a debate. Just let them in at this point so that we don't get to the situation where Russia feels like it just march into Finland and Sweden. I think that we should be defending what Russia doesn't control in Ukraine. We should move in there with the peacekeeping force, NATO, any willing partner in this world. We should put sanctions on China if they're not going along with the rest of the world and dealing with this. We should stop trading with China, which I know that you would definitely support in your union role because it would mean for a lot of jobs here in the United States of America. We got to lock this down. There was a order in this world. You don't just march into countries for no reason without provocation because you're the bigger, stronger country. And I think if we had, a carrier group sitting in Odessa, I don't think Vladimir Putin's invading Odessa, right? Because our F-22s could take out a MiG before the MiG even knows the F-22's anywhere near it. So let's, I don't want a war, and I don't think that Russia wants a war with the United States either because of how it would end, right? We would all be dead. So, at some point, peacekeeping needs to be part of our agenda here, and we need to do something to keep the peace and keep the peace in Finland and Sweden and keep the peace in where Russia isn't in Ukraine. They pulled out of Kiev. Okay, well, we should pull into Kiev and say, this is ours now. We'll deal with it and just leave it at that, like we did in Berlin.
Not us, NATO.
NATO, yeah.
Yeah, I'm still. My problem with that is it will be viewed as us versus the Russians, and from people that I'm talking to, Russia still sees this as a righteous war. They're fighting Nazis, and they're winning.
They're propagandists, and their propaganda is being believed by Russians. So we need to go into Ukraine, and then we need to put up a big TV antenna, and we need to beam into Russia everything we can, and we need to break that propaganda hold as well over there, just like the propaganda that's happening in this country is misleading people. It's even worse there because 90% of Russians get all of their news from the state, even though there were free media outlets, non-state controlled media outlets in Russia up until a couple of weeks ago. 90% of Russians didn't choose that. They chose state TV. And that's scary.
It almost sounds like some of my friends.
Yeah,
it's where we are. But the story today also, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, is that there's the possibility that Russia used chemical weapons in the city of Mariupol. Have you heard anything on this?
I haven't heard anything on this, but it wouldn't shock me if they did. Again, what are we waiting for? I mean, I mean, do we just let Ukraine fall? Do we just let the Ukrainian people die? Do we allow a genocide? I mean, I am the grandson of Holocaust survivors on my father's side, German Jews who fled tyranny, who fled the Nazis. And when I see the pictures of Bucha and I hear the stories, of chemical weapons being used, I just ask myself the question. I mean, we heard these stories about what was going on in Germany in World War II, and we didn't, we just let it happen for years before we really got involved. Yeah. So are we going to sit back for years and years, and then he's going to go into Poland or Lithuania or Latvia or one of the other former Soviet satellite nations, and we're going to just say, okay, go ahead. We don't want to have World War III. We don't want to go to nuclear war here. Do the Russians love their children too, to quote Sting? I don't think he wants to have a nuclear war either. So, maybe we need to put a line up. We need to put a line of tanks up and see if he wants to cross it. I don't think he does. Okay. And I know that's very hawkish and it doesn't sound very liberal, but I think just watching innocents die for nothing, for no reason, is just sickening. It gets me sick. And again, I just think about my grandparents fleeing Hitler, and it doesn't look that different to me. Yeah. Sorry.
No.
I know your audience probably hates this.
I'm not right. Disagreeing with you. I'm thinking about all of the people here who would not be behind this. I'm looking at a Republican Party that sadly is a good 63 of them voted not to support NATO and Ukraine in this. I'm looking at the movement in this country that would cause division, and I'm thinking of the horrible stuff happening here. And my mind is going in all these places, and I'm not disagreeing with you.
By the way, it wouldn't just be Republicans that would be against this. There'd be a lot of liberals against it too. It would be a very difficult thing for us to do here in the United States of America. We couldn't do it alone. We'd have to do it with 120 other countries behind us, not just NATO, but the entire world standing up and saying, we're done with this. We're going to stop this. We're going to have a new world order where we have peace in this world, and we don't solve our disputes at the point of a nuclear bomb. And it would be, I don't ever think it's going to happen. And I know I sound like a hawk and I don't want war. I just think that where there is a war and there are people being pummeled and nobody's defending them, and we can easily defend them. The Russians are clearly not good at conventional war. And, a very lightly equipped, decentralized Ukrainian military held them at bay for 45 days now. The United States military, with its NATO allies, would push them out within a week if it was just a conventional war, if we wanted to. This would not last long. And I'm not even saying we do that. I don't think we should go on the offensive. I think we should say, here's our line, don't cross it, and we're putting some people there. And if you fire on them, you're firing on us. And leave it at that. Call it peacekeepers. We won't call it offensive people. We're there to keep the peace.
Well, we'll see what happens. But Chris, I appreciate the thoughts. Great talk with you, my friends. Hope people will check out the podcast, the Aggressive Progressive Podcast. You can find that at chrishahn.com or wherever you get your podcast. Chris, great stuff. Appreciate the time.
Always.
I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you got questions, comments, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Going to take a quick break. If you're just joining us, make sure you grab our podcast. You can get that wherever you find podcasts, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that labor organizer Frank Norman disappeared from the Lakeland, Florida area and was never heard from again. It's believed he was kidnapped and murdered by members of the Ku Klux Klan. Norman was organizing citrus workers in the northern part of the state. The citrus groves, cigar factories, and textile mills in the area maintained a highly segregated workforce. The Klan terrorized workers and labor organizers that dared to disrupt this segregation by attempting to organize workers across racial lines. Klan members marched in parades through workers' neighborhoods and burnt crosses near union meetings. The next year, another union organizer, Joseph Shoemaker, was kidnapped by the Klan. Shoemaker had come to Florida from Vermont to organize cigar workers. 44 Klan members took Shoemaker and 2 other men 14 miles into the woods outside of Tampa. Shoemaker's leg was plunged into boiling hot tar. He was beaten and tortured and left for dead. When he was found, doctors tried to save his life by amputating his leg. But after 9 agonizing days, he died from his injuries. The investigation into the crime showed collaboration between the Klan and the local police. 5 policemen were convicted and sentenced to just 4 years in jail for their role in the terror attack. But the next year, their sentences were overturned and they were released. No one was ever held accountable for the murders of Norman or Shoemaker. These 2 men and countless others forgotten by history gave their lives trying to organize workers and stand up for racial justice. The Klan terrorized union organizers across the South, in states like Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So Chris kind of come off like a hawk there, but look, I don't disagree with him. I mean, at some point you got to stop the killing on a certain level. But what he advocates, this idea of we got to go in and draw lines and we've got to go in and stop the killing is, do we set up another, are we going to be like Germany? Are we going to have another, South Korea? Are we going to set up another 60-year endeavor where we're committing to peacekeeping for, generations? That's kind of the decision you have to make. And I don't think this country's ready to have that discussion. And look, I feel my heart breaks for what's going on over there. There really is a genocide going on over there. And I likened it to an abusive relationship. The idea of, well, if I can't have you, nobody can. That's what's going on. I mean, they're trashing that country. They're bombing everything, carpet bombing stuff, and killing thousands of people. The story out of Mariupol is 20 upwards of 20,000 people dead. Civilians. We're not talking about soldiers. I mean, and look, there's global outrage, but not on the scale that I don't know that you would kind of hope. Not on the global scale that you would think that you'd want to see. Where's the moral outrage from the religious right? Not a peep. Where is the right-wing war hawks? Where are they? Oh, that's right. They're on the other side. I actually had someone tell me that they wished Putin would hurry up and take over Ukraine so that they could stop killing all those people. Like those people defending democracy and fighting for freedom, somehow an inconvenience. And I asked him, I said, well, what would happen if someone invaded Pennsylvania? What would you do? Well, I'd fight. I go, what do you think they're doing? Even if the fight was when you knew you were going to lose, what would you do? Which is why, again, I come back to we should be giving them all the things that they need, and we are. We're sending stuff. We should be sending more to help them defend themselves in this moment. But I'm still not in favor of sending U.S. troops into Ukraine. I line them up on the border. I'll line them up in Finland and Sweden and let them in immediately. But I don't know. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, good story on union organizing. Going to talk about some of the victories at Amazon and Starbucks. And maybe a little bit about where the future of unions and workers' rights are going to take us. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. for working people from the top.
The facts are that oil majors testifying here today still returned billions of dollars to your shareholders in 2020 at the same time that you were laying off your workforce.
Lawmakers blast big oil CEOs for using wartime profits to enrich investors.
Today, we are proposing to take our sanctions a step further. We will make them broader and sharper, so that they cut even deeper into the Russian economy.
Europe moves to ban Russian coal. Plus, more destructive storms are causing more power outages and costing taxpayers more money.
Thanks to climate change. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
It's troubling that you place profits over people and profits over our planet.
Well, maybe, Congressman, but you might have just given the anti-American oil companies their new tagline.
Profits over people and profits over our planet.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I like it. Profits over our people and profits over our planet.
I'm sure they'll adopt that right away.
I think why wouldn't they? What do you have for us today?
Well, in a House Energy and Commerce hearing on Wednesday,
frankly, given your profits, you could drop prices without even increasing production.
Top executives from Big Oil defended their decisions to return cash to shareholders rather than increase production or lower wholesale prices as gas prices spike in the U.S. due to the fast pandemic recovery and Russia's war on Ukraine.
Because they hate America and the planet.
House Democrats criticized the CEOs and Republicans for falsely blaming Biden administration policies while the oil companies sit on millions of acres of unused drilling leases on public lands. At the same time, they're pulling in record profits. In earnings calls to investors in February, big oil CEOs admitted as much. Here are the CEOs of Pioneer Natural Resources, Diamondback Energy, and Occidental Resources.
We're not going to change our growth rate. We think it's important to return cash back to the shareholders.
No one wants to see that shareholder return program, put at risk.
We have no need and no intent to invest in production growth this year.
They have no need to invest in production growth this year, even as the Republicans are yelling at Joe Biden for not expanding oil drilling. Give me a break, man.
In the hearing on Wednesday, Democratic Representative Frank Pallone of New Jersey noted that oil companies decide the wholesale price of gas, which in turn sets retail prices. Pallone asked the CEOs of Chevron and BP if they would commit to any action to lower gas prices for American families.
Will you commit to doing whatever it takes, including increasing production, but also reducing dividends and buybacks in order to lower prices for struggling American consumers? Yes or no?
Mr. Chairman, we can increase production and return value.
All right, I'm going to take that as a no. Mr. Lawler, yes or no?
Yes, I can't commit. I can't commit to a reduction in buybacks and dividends.
All right, I hear you.
Unbelievable.
A new report from Bailout Watch confirms that big oil is using wartime profits to enrich investors, finding that the nation's biggest oil and gas companies significantly increased their shareholder dividends and stock buybacks after Russia invaded Ukraine. Progressive lawmakers in the hearing also pushed for accelerated investment in clean energy to reduce the nation's reliance on dictators and oil companies. In other news, in the wake of horrific evidence of probable war crimes committed by Russian troops against civilians in Ukraine, the European Union has proposed a total ban on imports of Russian coal.
Good.
But not yet imports of oil and gas. Europe gets about 45% of its coal from Russia, which is a major revenue source for Russia. A handful of EU countries have ruled out directly targeting Russian oil and gas. But tiny Lithuania is moving ahead anyway, with a ban on Russian natural gas.
Good.
Portugal announced this week it has moved up its target of reaching 80% clean electricity forward to 2026, 4 years earlier than previously planned.
Also good.
Here in the U.S., though, climate change impacts are already increasing costs. A new AP analysis of federal data shows that power outages from severe weather have doubled over the past 2 decades across the U.S. due to the increase in extreme weather driven by man-made global warming, which is crippling broad segments of the nation's aging electrical grid. AP found that at least 40 states now see longer outages, which are causing significant economic losses and can be deadly for the elderly, disabled, and other vulnerable communities. But finally, some good news. The Biden Environmental Protection Agency announced this week that it will finally ban deadly asbestos, a carcinogen that is still used in some products like brake pads and gaskets and still kills thousands of Americans every year.
And it's still not banned?
Nope. This final ban is made possible under a landmark law signed by President Obama that overhauled regulations governing tens of thousands of toxic chemicals.
Well, good thing big oil can't turn a profit on asbestos.
Profits over people and profits over our planet.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the last couple of weeks, we've been having some really incredible labor victories. You look at what's going on at Starbucks. Massachusetts lighting it up. You know, I saw a couple of victories, 11-0, 15-0 at Starbucks there. New York doing the same thing. Victories all across the country. Starbucks, look out. They're coming. The coffee wars have begun. Amazon, you listen to Chris Smalls, he's saying 50 to 100, now 100 different facilities have said, hey, we want to start looking at organizing our facilities. There is a thirst, there is a want. And as I've said a million times, working people have had enough. And they're finally realizing that coming together, collectively bargaining for better wages, hours, conditions, the way forward. And we've got a president. We've got the most pro-labor president in my lifetime saying it's your right and we should be encouraging it. And we've got a general counsel at the NLRB who I just adore. And I'd say that if he was a man as well. But the fact that we're going to make captive audience meetings unfair labor practices, bless her heart. Love that. Absolutely. But here to talk about organizing, here to talk about how we can get young people to join unions and how we can fix some of the brokenness of our labor laws and bring the pendulum back to the middle as opposed to all the way onto the side of corporate special interest and big money. I've asked Daisy Pitkin to come talk with us. She is the author of On the Line, a story of class, solidarity, and two women's fight, epic fight to build a union. Daisy, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
This great book. I love stories about people standing up, fighting, and ultimately doing well. I love winning.
Winning is good. Yeah, it's true.
Winning is good. And if you
these days, it seems.
If you look around, it's happening. And it's happening because, well, people like you, organizers on the ground, doing the hard work of bringing people together. And I think what we've learned at Amazon of getting workers to do for themselves the work of organizing and fighting for their own rights, empowering people. I think that's kind of the message.
Rick, I think that's the key to what's happening right now. There's a real organic groundswell of workers happening, at Starbucks, as you mentioned, Amazon, but also in other sectors, media workers, museum workers, librarians, higher ed workers. There's a miners' strike happening in Alabama right now, the longest strike in that state's history. Workers are standing up in every sector, in every region across the country, more so than they have, in my lifetime. It's really inspiring, but the key to it is that a lot of it is workers organizing themselves and each other. The work I'm doing right now as an organizer is really different from a lot of the work that I've done in the 20 years that I've been a union organizer. And part of that is figuring out how to, help this groundswell, the momentum that workers are building for themselves, try not to contain it or control it. Just take whatever experiences I have, expertise I have as an experienced organizer, democratize the skills that I have built as quickly as possible so that workers have those skills, and then get out of the way and let them do the work of organizing their unions.
Now that is a huge difference from the organizing that I was taught in the 80s and 90s. I've talked about this, extensively over the last several months, and why I thought the Amazon labor union in New York had a shot at winning. I didn't predict they were going to win. I said I think they have a shot of winning for a couple reasons. One, they were doing the grassroots kind of organizing that I think you need to do. And two, I think New York has a union culture unique to New York that a lot of other places may not have. And because, they all know somebody who's been in a union, who was in a union, and sees the benefits. So that could help move, was my thought at the time. But what you're talking about and what they did is not revolutionary. I mean, everyone's going, oh my gosh, they reinvented the wheel. No, they went back and they looked at how organizing was done in the 30s and 40s, how my grandparents' generation did it. And that is empowering people on the front line. Not this idea, Daisy, of the union will come in and it'll do for you. It was about you do for yourself, and we'll give you the tools and empower you to do for yourself. And I think that's the most important, most exciting thing we can do right now.
I think that's right. I think there are a lot of echoes right now, the kind of groundswell that's happening with that kind of earlier part of the labor movement that you were talking about before the NLRA actually came into being. When workers were organizing themselves and each other kind of shop by small shop, but then building massive movements of workers who were going to take collective action together to demand that their employers come to the table and bargain with them. We're seeing that same kind of energy happening right now all around us. And part of it is because labor law is broken, right? It protects the right to organize just about as much as it did before it existed, quite frankly. Labor law in this country is broken. And it is so loopholed, and the kind of labor avoidance industry is helping corporations just walk through these wide open loopholes, right? And workers, I think, are, as you said at the beginning of the segment, they've just sort of had enough. I think there are a lot of forces at play. We're seeing younger workers. I mean, at Starbucks, a lot of the workers are calling themselves Generation U, Generation Union, like they identify as people who are galvanized by the labor movement and are also going to reinvigorate it, right? But also, coming off of the pandemic, I think the pandemic did a lot to bring into sharp focus, maybe especially for young people, all of the forces at work that are kind of working against them at this moment. And they've had enough, and they're going to stand up, and they're going to do it sort of by themselves, hopefully with the guidance and resources that unions can provide. But really, it's organizers standing up, organizing themselves and each other.
Yeah, empowering, educating, inoculating, all of that stuff. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Daisy Pitkin. She's an organizer, also author of On the Line, A Story of Class, Solidarity, and Two Women's Epic Fight to Build a Union. We'll get links out on social media how you can check this out. I'm sure you can get it at the A Place. Also, Powell's Books. I think I found it over there. We'll get links out on how you can get it somewhere else but the A Place. Please look anywhere but there. But if you have to, I guess there. You can also go to daisypitkin.net. I'm sure there'll be something there. Or workman.com. I'm sure there's a link that you can get there as well. We'll get links out on social media how you can check that out. Now Daisy, you talked about some of the the fact that they're empowering people in the workplace. And one of the things that I loved about Chris Smalls and the conversation that they were talking was how to respond to these captive audience meetings when they bring in these high-priced union busters or these union avoidance firms, as they like to call themselves, union busters. Mm-hmm. And I love the fact that Jennifer Abruzio over at the NLRB, the general counsel's, now coming out and saying we should consider those captive audience meetings unfair labor practices. About time. But yes. What I loved what they did is they stood up and they fought back in those meetings. And they fought back because they were informed. The union did the inoculating. They did the educating of saying that, hey, when the guy at the front of the room says, Chris is going to be driving around in a Lamborghini, stand up and say, no, I know him. He's driving this. He's driving a Toyota or a Ford. That education process, I think, is so important to fight back against lies and misinformation.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, we have to do a lot of inoculation with organizing committees so that they're able in workplaces to educate their coworkers so that in the captive audience meetings, which this last week, by the way, were happening in Starbucks stores across Pittsburgh. Corporate Starbucks flew in people, some top brass from their regional leadership, to run captive audience meetings in stores where we had filed for union elections and also in stores where we haven't yet. And the inoculation really kind of kicked in at that moment, that workers could listen to what it was that their bosses were telling them and understand that this is a message from the company and that we have to take it with a grain of salt. We've got to stand up to it. Workers were standing up in the middle of those captive audience meetings, asking questions about why it is that corporate was making these claims, what their end game was, making really informed kind of choices about how to push back in front of their coworkers in these captive audience meetings. So I think, yeah, it's true that inoculation is key. When we say that, you know, this new kind of phase of organizing or this new momentum that we're seeing is really workers organizing themselves and each other, it doesn't mean that we're throwing out the playbook of organizing. There's very good, deep organizing going on in these work sites. It's just the workers are doing it with each other generally.
No, and that's the important thing. Now, you also talk about you organized, you know, some immigrant laundry workers in Arizona, I believe it was, and you talked about the dangerous work that they do, and you know, a lot of people would ask, well, you know, why are you dealing with them? Why care about, you know, immigrant workers and laundry facilities? You know, we got Americans who need organizing. You know, why do you think that's important?
I think that, you know, what people don't realize is that there are industrial laundry facilities in every city and large community in the United States. That when you go to a hotel or you go to a hospital and you touch sheets and pillowcases, hospital gowns, when you go to a restaurant and you touch a napkin, a cloth napkin, those all get loaded onto the backs of big trucks and they go to these industrial laundry facilities. And there are workers there. Sometimes they're immigrants, sometimes they're refugees, sometimes they're your neighbors. And they work in these massive industrial factories on hot, heavy, dangerous machinery. They come into contact with biohazardous and chemical hazards on a daily basis. And they touch and clean this linen that you might use in, you know, on a daily or weekly basis, depending on who you are. I think it largely is invisible. People don't understand that this industry even exists, much less that there are human hands at work in these big factories. And I think it's important to realize that kind of cycle of service work, even the invisible parts of it, right? And so in On the Line, I tell the story of the 5 years that it took to get to majority union status among these laundry factories in Phoenix, Arizona. And at the time, in the early 2000s, the workers there happened to be mostly women, mostly immigrant workers. And they were kind of, you know, among the most vulnerable workers, perhaps, in the country at the time, and organizing and standing up to their employers, some of whom were multi-billion-dollar multinational corporations. Standing up to them for a voice at work was one of the most courageous things I've ever seen. And I think that it's a good time for this book to exist in the world, because I think, you know, a lot of people, we're seeing headlines on a daily basis now about groups of workers organizing and winning. And it's hard to know sometimes what it is that goes on behind that headline, the Herculean task that it is to organize a union in this country under broken labor law, how hard it is to win, and why we can't stop trying, why it's so critical for the labor movement to grow and continue to build and build power for working people. And I hope that the book can give some context behind those headlines. It shows, it's kind of a blow by blow account of what it is to organize a union in this country right now.
And I think there are a couple important things to remember. in this. You listen to learn our labor history. The idea that an injury to one being an injury to all. The reason I brought that out is, if we're going to allow immigrant workers to be abused and taken advantage of, eventually it's going to harm everybody. Eventually conditions are going to degrade for everyone. That's why we fight for the least among us, because an injury to one truly would be an injury to all. And the other side of it is and you do a really great job in this book on the line, and I hope folks will take a look at it, of saying just how hard it is and how much of a Herculean leap it is to organize. And I would throw out there, it shouldn't be, because the NLRA gives us the right to organize. It gives us the right to join and form unions. It gives us the right to collectively bargain. And it also says that our government is going to encourage that. The original intent of the NLRA was not to put a barrier between us and our right. It was never about elections and intimidation and captive audience meetings. In fact, the original NLRA didn't give a single word, a single sentence, a single paragraph of any rights to the employers. It gave it all to the workers because they understood. They understood the employers had all the rights. This was simply about somewhat balancing the tables and creating industrial peace. And we're in a moment with the Great Resignation, and you know this, Daisy, like anyone. 47 million people left jobs last year. If those workers had the right to join and form unions, I'll bet you they'd have been striking. I'll bet you they'd have been making wages better and conditions better and benefits better, which is why we need stronger unions. Just my thought.
That's right. That's right. And I think, in this moment, the Great Resignation, on the sort of heels of the Great Resignation, or maybe still in the very middle of it, we don't quite know where it's going at this point, but it gives workers some inherent power, right? That, if I'm working, excuse my language, but a crappy job right now, I can walk out the door and go across the street and get another crappy job. There's no, it gives workers the power of being mobile, of being able to leave. I think that union organizing is a good sign. It's a sign that workers they don't want to leave their crappy job to go find another crappy job. They want to make their job better, more sustainable, safer, better able to help them make ends meet at home, give them better access to health insurance, right? They're staying and they're fighting for their own livelihood in the company where they are, rather than just walking out the door and going to find another crappy job down the street. I think we're in a moment now where people are saying, I've kind of, I've had enough of this, and I recognize that I have some power. And I think we're also in a moment where people are seeing other groups of workers in their own communities or in, through the headlines across the country, seeing workers stand up and win. And winning begets winning in the labor movement. When we see people win, when we witness their capacity to fight for a voice at work, it grows our own capacity to fight, right? And that's what we're seeing right now. It's exponential growth of momentum. And I think these corporations don't quite know what they're in for. We have an organizing committee member here in Pittsburgh who used an analogy the other day that I love. And he said, the old playbook of union busting just isn't working anymore. They can't third party the union because the union literally is workers doing the work themselves. So the third partying message isn't working anymore. All of their sort of threats are kind of ringing hollow and empty. Most of the things that Starbucks is doing at this point to fight the campaign and that other companies are doing is just backfiring. So the analogy that he used was, it's like they're seeing this tidal wave coming and they're shooting at it with a squirt gun, just making the problem incrementally worse for themselves as the tidal wave is rushing ahead. And I really think that's true.
No, it's a great analogy. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Daisy Pitkin. The book On the Line, a story of class solidarity and two women's epic fight to build a union. We'll get links out on social media how you can get a look at the book. Workman.com is the place where you can get it. Also, daisypitkin.net. We'll get links out, of course, on how to do that. Last question I've got for you, because as you said, look, there are people who are thirsting at this. When I was doing organizing, people would say, yeah, I'm only going to be here a couple more weeks, couple more months. I'd say, yeah, but fight, make this place better, leave something better behind, change the world by changing your little piece of it. What do you say to people who are I'm only going to be here a couple of months. It's a crappy job, like you said. What do you say to those folks? What's the words for people who may want to join a union, may want to fight to make things better? What's that elevator?
I think now is the time. Now is the opportunity that we're going to have, because we're learning how to take on these big corporations and win. And now is the time to sort of get on board with this tidal wave, to add to it. We're not just changing workplaces one by one at this point. We're talking about changing our relationship, or the working class's relationship to industry at this point, kind of as a whole. So even if you're leaving, even if you think it's not going to benefit you, now is the time to sort of join this labor movement, organize your workplace, talk to your coworkers about organizing. There's more momentum now than there maybe ever will be, right?
This absolutely the moment. Daisy, I appreciate the time. The book, incredible. Hope folks will take a look at it. On the Line, a story of class solidarity and two women's epic fight to build a union. You can get that at daisypitkin.net or workman.com. We'll get links out on social media. Highly suggested. Daisy, I appreciate the time. Hope you'll come back and talk to us again soon.
I'd love to. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Also, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me what you think. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back with your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK. 1-866-416-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I tell you, I love her book. I think she's fantastic. I hope people will take a look at it. On the Line by Daisy Pitkin. Just don't go to the A place, at least not yet. We'll get links out on social media at Rick Smith Show on Twitter on how you take a look at that. But, the fact that she goes into a lot of labor history and combines stories, talks about, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 2011, the Bread and Roses strike in 2011. In 1911 was the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. The Bread and Roses strike in 1912. It talks about the organizing that went on there, and really all of the things that the challenges that they went into before the NLRA. There was organizing that happened before the National Labor Relations Act. And, we're in a moment right now, we're in the private sector. Union density is at a place where it was illegal to be a union member. Almost where it was when yellow dog contracts were the rule of the land. And for those who don't know what yellow dog contracts are, they were things that employers used to make people sign that said, if you ever sign up to become a union member, we will fire you immediately and you will have no recourse whatsoever. They were ruled unconstitutional at some, down the road, but early 20th century, but still the rule of law for quite some time. And a threat that really held sway with people for quite some time. Much like today's, non-competes that they make, sandwich workers make. You're not going to go compete with that sandwich place across the street because peanut butter and jelly is now proprietary. It's crazy what we've allowed employers to get away with. And look, she talks about it in the book, just how difficult it is. And you hear the rhetoric from the right, nobody wants to join unions. No, people struggle to join unions. People fight. They sacrifice. And it shouldn't be that difficult. It shouldn't. And in fact, when we come back, we're going to talk to a guy who, his coworkers, they just wrapped up a 2.5-year campaign in a victorious fashion. When we come back, Lewis Jones is going to be here to share his thoughts on how his fellow professors at the community college locally, how they did it. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1934. That was the day that labor organizer Frank Norman disappeared from the Lakeland, Florida area and was never heard from again. It's believed he was kidnapped and murdered by members of the Ku Klux Klan. Norman was organizing citrus workers in the northern part of the state. The citrus groves, cigar factories, and textile mills in the area maintained a highly segregated workforce. The Klan terrorized workers and labor organizers that dared to disrupt this segregation by attempting to organize workers across racial lines. Klan members marched in parades through workers' neighborhoods and burnt crosses near union meetings. The next year, another union organizer, Joseph Shoemaker, was kidnapped by the Klan. Shoemaker had come to Florida from Vermont to organize cigar workers. 44 Klan members took Shoemaker and 2 other men 14 miles into the woods outside of Tampa. Shoemaker's leg was plunged into boiling hot tar. He was beaten and tortured and left for dead. When he was found, doctors tried to save his life by amputating his leg. But after 9 agonizing days, he died from his injuries. The investigation into the crime showed collaboration between the Klan and the local police. 5 policemen were convicted and sentenced to just 4 years in jail for their role in the terror attack. But the next year, their sentences were overturned and they were released. No one was ever held accountable for the murders of Norman or Shoemaker. These 2 men and countless others forgotten by history gave their lives trying to organize workers and stand up for racial justice. The Klan terrorized union organizers across the South, in states like Tennessee, Georgia, and South Carolina. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
I think we can now say the obvious. The Republican Party has gone bull goose bonkers. Its leaders have turned the once proud GOP brand into an unprincipled gaggle of corporate profiteers, hate mongers, and screwball conspiracy theorists. They're so far out that the Hubble telescope couldn't find them. But where is my Democratic Party? Here's a transformative opportunity to forge a solid political coalition, a multiracial, urban-rural, farm-labor alliance based on fundamental principles and programs of fairness and opportunity for all. Isn't that what the party says it stands for? This is the prime time to demonstrate it, to reach out and unite ordinary Americans behind a national agenda of lasting progressive change. It's not like the party elders would have to start from scratch, for an energized, feisty movement of grassroots battlers against corporate greed and government injustice is already organizing, winning, and growing popular support all across the country. But rather than welcoming and building on the exciting advances of these popular movements, the party's old-line insider clique of big funders, consultants, and corporate politicos passively assume that the GOP's goofiness and nastiness will turn off enough voters that Democrats can win by default. Meanwhile, the establishment insists that Democrats only push modest incremental reforms so as not to offend corporate funders or spook moderate Republicans. Hello, brilliant strategists. A primary function of the Democratic Party is to offend the corporate powers. Also, there are only about 6 moderate Republicans left in America, so appeasing them is not a big win, especially when it costs you the support of grassroots voters eager for a politics bold enough and big enough to end business-as-usual economics. This is Jim Hightower saying, as our own history teaches, it takes intentional gutsiness to create a politics that matters. Republicans won't do that. Will Democrats?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So on Tuesday in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, there's going to be a big rally at the state capitol. Our friends over at AFT Pennsylvania, our friends at APSCUF, and our friends at PSEA, the Pennsylvania State Education Association, they're going to hold a big rally in the Rotunda on education funding for higher ed. So that, look, hey, we have done a poor job in Pennsylvania funding higher education, and it's been horrible what they've done, especially when you look at our state system of higher education, the PASHE schools. They're in the process right now of condensing some of them, of merging a couple of them because they haven't funded them at proper levels. And still, the system isn't out there going, hey, we need more money. We need more help to draw more students in. We need to keep our infrastructure strong. And this is where the unions who represent the faculty and the people who, well, make the system work are saying, you know what, maybe you should be doing this. Maybe you should be funding education so the kids of Pennsylvania have an opportunity. So tomorrow, if you're in the Harrisburg area, by all means, stop in. And if you're in Pennsylvania, call your representatives. Say, fund higher education. Return it to the way it was back in the 80s. Return it to the way it was generations past, where a student, my generation, if you lived in Pennsylvania, you picked up about a third of the cost of the education, and the state picked up about 2/3. That now is completely flipped on its head. The student picks up 3/4, and the state only about a quarter. We have done something seriously wrong to an entire generation of kids just so we can give tax breaks to corporate America and handouts to the well-connected. It's time to fix that. Now, good news. Talked about this on Friday. Huge victory for our friends over at the Harrisburg Area Community College as the faculty there voted to join their union. Now, you may remember, folks who've been longtime listeners, we've had people on to talk about this. It's been 2.5 years that these faculty members have been demanding their rights. And finally last week, they won their vote. And here to share some thoughts on that election, I've asked Lewis Jones to come talk with us. Lewis is an adjunct professor of anthropology there at HAC, the Harrisburg Area Community College. He's also one of the head folks there with the Hawk Professors United group, hawkfacultyunited.org, their website. Lewis, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, my pleasure, Rick. Thanks for asking me to be here.
Let's start off with the congratulations. I know I've been talking to you for what seems like at least 1.5 years now, 2 maybe. I know you guys have been working hard on this. I know you guys have been at this diligently. So this has got to feel pretty good. Victory.
It feels great to know that all the hard work we put in, all the effort that we went through to try to reach out to our colleagues, to help them understand why we were doing this, and with the support of the community as well as our students, we were able to achieve a victory in spite of everything that was put in front of us. The obstacles that we encountered just made us stronger.
Yeah,
and we rose above it and came together.
Yeah, it's a great story. But looking at it, should it have been this difficult? I mean, did it have to be this difficult?
No, it didn't have to be this difficult. The fact of the matter is, we were the last community college in the state to finally unionize. And the whole thing about it was the administration led by President Ski did not want a union to come to HAC simply because that changes the dynamics and it makes them more accountable. The fact that we as faculty now can go in and negotiate, yes, for pay, but also negotiate to have more say in how our students are actually educated. We can actually fight to get them the resources they need, things that we didn't have the power to do before, simply because the system was set up so that we didn't have any say.
Yeah, no, we've talked in the past about the conditions and the benefits and all the stuff that adjunct professors don't have. And for me, it's always been, I don't know why people put up with it. And this is one of those opportunities to right wrongs and to make what you do valuable, to make what you do respected. Because you are educating the next generation, the most valuable resource this country has. And I think that's worthy of respect and dignity. And that comes with some job security. That comes with maybe only having to have one job and not 2, 3, or 4. It seems that I want you to be the best at your field you can be. I don't want you working down at Home Depot trying to cobble together an existence for your family. I want you to be able to educate my kid the best way possible. And that can only happen if we fund education and we make sure that people like you get paid a reasonable living.
Well, the big thing that we always said is simple. It's not just about us. It's about our students. It's about our community. If we can't focus on giving the best education to our students, we're not producing the best people to go out and work in our communities in and around South Central Pennsylvania. We're trying to make sure our students are equipped with the skills and the knowledge they need to provide for their families, just like we want to provide for ours. And so it's as you said, it's about respect. It's about treating us as the professionals we are, and treating us as the professionals who are trying to create the next group of professionals for the future.
Yeah, and having somewhere for that next group of professionals to spend their careers as well. Now, during the break, you said there were a couple of people you wanted to thank for all of their hard work, and well, maybe some of them for not their hard work, but for them being in the way. Who are those folks?
Well, first of all, I want to Amy, who, as you know, Amy Winthrow has been one of the staunch movers and shakers in this whole movement. From day one, she has been there. She has helped lead the way. She's been the biggest advocate, and I can't say anything more than that we have to thank her for all she's done. We also have to thank Lori Lebo, as well as Fiona Boomer from PSEA, for all their support that they gave us throughout the past 2.5 years. They were there every step of the way with us and helped keep us on the right track, keep the ship going in the right way. But most importantly, there's one person I have to reach out and thank, and that is our president of the college, President John Siglieski, because without his determination to stop us and everything he's done to shut down this movement, we would not have had the fortitude to continue on to the success. So we have to thank him for the simple fact that he was the inspiration that kept us going.
Sometimes it's the horrible that makes you keep going and want to push forward and prove someone wrong, because ultimately this is the person who's going to decide your fate. And I got to be honest, you look in the workplace, I think you should have a say when sitting across from someone like that and someone to stand next to you. Now the hard part, Lewis, is clearly behind you, I think. Well, part of the hard part, winning this election, while satisfying and hard, gives way now to negotiating this first contract, which in this country seems, almost as difficult as winning an election, if not more so. Explain to me what you guys are doing to move in that direction, to get that first contract, and what do you think this is going to take to get that done?
Well, the first thing we're doing is sitting down to organize our bylaws and constitution for our local union, because that's going to be the first thing we have to get done before we can move to the next step, because we have to get our officers in place, get the committees together that are going to be in charge of those negotiations. So we're actually reaching out right now. We're starting to talk to our other colleagues who are interested in this, who have been supportive, to tell them now's the time for them to get ready, because we're going to have an election, so we can get our officers in place, get our nomination committee in place, to get our negotiation committee in place. And we're going to partner with PSEA, who's going to help us through this whole process. We don't expect it to be easy, because we know that HAC is not necessarily going to make this easy. They're going to want to try to keep everything in their favor. They're not going to want to sit down with us and negotiate openly and fairly. So we're preparing for that. We'll be going through training on how to properly negotiate and prepare ourselves for what's ahead. We realize it could take us a year or more to get that first contract. The key part is right now there's not much they can do to change the status quo, but we've got to think what we need to have. So that means we're going to sit down with all of our members and say, what is it you feel is important for us to be sitting down to negotiate? What are the things that you feel we need to bring to the table? Because that's what we're going to go in armed with, and we're going to do as much as we can to get all of it. We know we probably won't, but we're going to try, because that's the least we can do.
No, you go in, it's like any negotiations. You go in with what you want, you sit down, you bargain back and forth, you walk. How it's always been told to me is you go in with everything you want, and if both sides walk away mad, it means you probably got a decent agreement.
Exactly. And we're cognizant of that. And I just hope that Hack realizes that as well. But I do feel that they're probably going to try to keep doing things they can to disenfranchise as well as to stymie the movement as we go forward.
You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Lewis Jones. Lewis is an adjunct professor of anthropology at Harrisburg Area Community College here in my local area. He is one of the head folks over with the Hawk Faculty United group. Their website, hawkfacultyunited.org. They've just won their union election. We're talking a little bit about what it took to win and, well, maybe where they're going to be going on negotiating their first contract. Now, I want to go back to the 2.5 years you guys spent doing this. And, we've heard some absolute horror stories from the Amazon organizing going on. We're seeing what's going on at Starbucks. What kind of treatment did you guys get from Hack as you guys were doing this? Were you guys subject to the captive audience meetings and the threats and the intimidation that we've heard from other places? What kind of things happened during your campaign?
Actually, everything that you could think about in the union busting playbook was pulled out. Everything from intimidation by pulling individuals in who are part of the union movement to threatening them, making them feel like they could lose their jobs. We got the emails consistently. Especially over the last few months as we moved toward the election, almost every day we saw emails coming out trying to tell everyone to vote no. Here's how you vote no. And PSEA's lying to you. So the accusations, the lies were there throughout the whole process. The intimidation was there. And the fact of the matter is they were actually trying to utilize the people that we trust the most, some of our deans, some of our other people, leadership, as means to tell us that we don't want a union, we don't need a union because we've got shared governance. But if shared governance actually worked, we would have never moved to go to unionization. If our voice was being heard and listened to, we'd have never had a desire for a union. So everything they're saying was to make people believe something that wasn't true. And they've tried it all throughout the process for the past 2.5 years, up until the day before we vote. We were receiving those same emails telling us, don't vote no, vote no, do not vote yes. You don't want a union because if you get a union, you lose your voice, which is one of the biggest lies they can tell. Unions give us a voice. They don't take your voice. And so they went as far as even tell people by simply signing a card saying you're interested in having a union, that's giving up your voice. And my first thought was, well, how's that giving up my voice? But it's my right to decide I want a union. If you believe in social justice, which we kept hearing from our leadership, well, social justice means you want everybody to have the same opportunity. Well, that means if we want the opportunity to unionize, you should be supporting it, not trying to fight it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we're seeing a lot of organizing in higher ed, which means smart people, you guys, people with advanced degrees are finally waking up to the reality that, sadly, you guys have been getting screwed for a long time. I mean, I know a lot of people who are adjunct professors who have, master's degrees, PhDs, are really bright people, but for the good of the profession, for the good of my students, I don't want to cause waves. And now they've awakened to the reality that what had once been an esteemed position is now almost, is disposable factory work almost. And what I'm seeing around the country is this thirst to reclaim that dignity and respect, and we're doing it through our unions. We saw your victory. We saw one at MIT, the graduate students there. We're seeing a fight out at Kenyon College. We're seeing it all across the country as finally people in the education field are going, it's not about it. It's not just taking care of our students. It's about demanding careers and opportunities and better for ourselves and the future. And I think that's important.
Well, it gets down to the simple fact. If you look at most higher ed institutions today, they're very top heavy. You'll see a lot of administrators who are sitting there and they've got to find jobs for them because they're giving them a lot of money, but they're putting the money into creating a lot of chiefs, but they're not supporting those people down below. And the fact of the matter is, if the reason we are here is to educate the youth of this country, that means we need to invest in it. And that means investing in what we need for the students, investing in making sure we got the best possible instructors, professors, lecturers on those campuses every day who want to be there and do this job. And that means they have to have security. When you're sitting there watching schools go to where you've got 75% of the professors are now adjuncts. There's no avenue to promotion, to full-time, to tenure, because they're trying to whittle down the number of tenured faculty because they don't want to pay the benefits. They're asking them to retire, and they want to overload on adjuncts because they don't have to pay them anything. You know, it's not saying. I mean, let's be honest. I know people who are working at 5-6 different colleges teaching classes just to make a living, and they're barely above the poverty level. That's not the way it's supposed to work.
No, it's not supposed to the way it's supposed to work at all. Louis, I appreciate the time. I appreciate the work that you do. Congratulations. Last question I've got for you. What's the word for other adjuncts? What's the word for other people who are out there who don't have union protections? What's the word to them?
The word to them is get together, form your collective, fight for your rights, because if you don't do so now, it will never happen.
Louis, I appreciate the time, man. Great stuff. Congratulations again.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Good stuff, Louis Jones. Like I said, if you're an adjunct professor right now, unions, your best buddies. You should be joining and forming as we speak, just like Louis and his coworkers there at the Harrisburg Area Community College here in my neighborhood. Great stuff. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you're just joining us, make sure you never miss a moment. Grab the podcast. You can get that iTunes, iHeart, Stitcher, Podbean, anywhere where you find your podcasts. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Even the crazies can email me. I love those because I usually spend the most time on those. Like I did today. I fell down the rabbit hole of answering just far out, one guy, well, we'll meet in the street and we'll fight. I'm going, you live in Montana. You think you're going to make it to Pennsylvania by 3 o'clock today? Crazy stuff. Good news over the weekend. You may remember last week we talked a little bit about the fact that a woman in Texas was arrested because she had an abortion after the 6-week period. You may remember this. They arrested her for what they called a self-induced illegal abortion. She was taken into custody on Thursday, charged with murder, held on $500,000 bond. She eventually got out. Well, the local district attorney there on Sunday dropped the charges and let her go, saying, it's prosecutorial discretion. That rests with the district attorney's office. They were not going to move on this. It's not the state of Texas decision to do it. It's the district attorney. That this person is following their oath. And the only correct outcome was to let this woman go. Now, the question then became, at least my question is, how'd they find out? I want to know who ratted this woman out to the state. I want to know if it was the hospital. There are some reports that I have seen that they were notified by a hospital. There are some reports that maybe the bounty hunter law was part of this. I don't know. I think now an investigation into this has to happen. And here's the good thing. This is why I'm a fan of trial lawyers, because I'm guaranteeing you Miss Herrera is going to file a lawsuit, or I would encourage her to, because this seems like a violation. This seems like a violation of her constitutional rights that she should be pursuing. And she should be suing the state of Texas, and if for no other reason, to find out why her privacy was violated. And if it was the hospital, then you got to sue them. That HIPAA thing, I think, isn't that kind of a big deal? Because that is a federal law. That isn't a Texas law. Texas law doesn't get to supersede federal law. I know my conservative friends like to believe it does. I know my 10ther folks like to say, no, Rick, the 10th Amendment. No federal law still supersedes. Today, abortion is still legal. You can't try someone for murders today. Not yet. Supreme Court hasn't gone that far yet. Maybe down the road. Hold your water. It might come. But here's the weird thing, and here's the scary thing. According to the Guttmacher Institute, they are a pro-reproductive rights group. They say that there are, right now, as we speak, 22 states who have anti-abortion legislation on the books. These 22 states either outright ban abortion or ban very early on in pregnancy. Now, I always thought that 20 weeks was the cutoff. And I've been told that variation in a couple of weeks there was kind of the norm for a very long time until you get into some of these states like Texas is 6. Which, from what I've been told, and again, I don't know everything. I know what I've been told. I've been told that at 6 weeks, most people don't even know. And I know that I wasn't told with any of my 3 kids until well after 6 weeks. So, I think that's why they chose 6 weeks, don't you? So we could create this environment where, oh, sorry, too late. Do you see where they're taking us? Do you see the world that they're creating? You know what's coming next. They're going to try and restrict access to contraception. They're going to try and restrict access to Plan B because that is the backup. This is where the common sense comes in. You can be against abortion. And I personally am. You can be against that and not be insane. You can be against it and not be stupid. You go, okay, well, if I'm against it, how about, here's an idea, we prevent it. We have the technology. We have the ability. Why don't we pursue that? Why don't we pursue education? Tell our kids, hey, here's how you protect yourselves. It's what we did. It's what we do with our children. Have that conversation. It's uncomfortable as all can be. They don't like it either. But the information is there and available. And the pathway is there and available. Because the goal, protect yourself. Don't make big mistakes. Children at an early age, kind of a big mistake. I look at my mother, pregnant at 16, ruined her life. Spent the rest of her adult life in poverty, struggling to make ends meet. Horrible. I want that for no one. On the other hand, I want social policies that are going to encourage women to bring children into the world. Anti-abortion people, you can get me on your side if you go, hey, we're going to make sure that every child gets fed. We're going to make sure every child has a place to put their head at night. We're going to make sure every child gets a good quality education. We're going to make sure that we're going to have the funding to, as far as their talents will take them, they're going to be able to do that because we're going to make sure every child gets that. You can win me. But this idea, this draconian, narrow-minded, hateful kind of policy that you're pushing, bounty hunters, picking people up and throwing them in jail, accusing them of murder, you're not getting me that way. And you're certainly not going to move the needle on changing habits and behaviors. I mean, if you truly want to stop it, you prevent it. But that's a conversation we can't have because it's really not about that. It's about punishing. It's really not about the issue. It's about everything else. It's about control. It's about the end of privacy. It's about so much more. And that's what's infuriating to me. And I hope I hope the anger and the outrage starts coming, because they're deadly serious. If it weren't for this local district attorney, that woman would still be standing trial for murder. She'd be heading towards trial for murder. And that's scary. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, podcast, fabulous podcast. You can get that at thericksmithshow.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.